Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Jason Hirshman, co-founder of Uncountable. The Uncountable platform is an enterprise-class cloud solution for modern global R&D organization. Jason, I'm so excited to chat with you. As we were chatting before the episode, not only am I excited about your background and what you bring to the table, but also Uncountable and really the kind of unpacking the truths behind this whole kind of R&D, this research and development process that other organizations oftentimes have many projects that they're doing at one point in time. And I think as consumers, we only see the results of them, maybe their papers, maybe their products, but really just curious about what really it takes for companies to identify, research, develop a product, and then implement it into the market and see what complexity that's at a high scale. So really got to dive into that. But before we get into all that good stuff, what were you doing before you started the company?
Well, thanks for having me here, Julian. Yeah, I'm definitely happy to dive in a little bit more about what we're doing here at Uncountable. My background is in computer science and math. I studied at Stanford before starting Uncountable about 7 years ago now. So for the last 7 years, we've been working on this company. It's been definitely a long and exciting journey. I come from a place of really loving software development, but also being passionate about the use of data analytics. So when we started Uncountable, we were looking to apply data management practices to some other industries beyond just tech or finance. I basically found that the R&D space was one that could really use a lot better conclusions from data and where decisions are made very consistently by leveraging data and insights from them. But it was very hard for scientists to actually compile everything together. So I have a lot of passion for statistics, for that type of analysis, and that's what I bring to Uncountable.
And it's incredible to think about not only the increase in popularity of data, but the increase in the ability to actually understand it more and take on large data sets. And describe in terms of use cases, I think a lot of us think about like big pharma and all these like research heavy organizations, but there's more to the story there in terms of companies that are really kind of pushing projects out and really trying to understand for different products and things like that. What are some things that audiences may not be aware of in terms of companies using these types of projects to understand whether it's product or service, and how are they using the data to implement what they're researching?
Well, I think that's exactly right. There's a lot of focus on things like pharma, where finding that the next drug can be a really big deal and life-changing. But the reality is that products we interact with every day have a whole supply chain behind them, where if you're able to advance the technologies in that supply chain, you're getting products to market faster, and we're seeing innovations in our daily lives. So everything from the paint on your walls to the batteries in your electronics and now your cars, or even the shampoo that you're using in the shower, all those come from raw materials, chemicals, all sorts of different things that are developed by a series of companies before they hit your shelves. And we work with companies all across the supply chain to make sure that their product development teams are able to release products a lot faster, and they're getting better insights about what they can actually develop next.
It's so fascinating to think about the speed at which platforms like yours can really help things go to market and really start testing in the environment. But even just taking a step back, setting up the environment to test, what does that look like for a lot of companies before the data is even collected? Is it they're using previous data? Are they going through doing case studies? What types of structure and environments are they testing in, and what are they measuring for in particular?
Yeah, one of my favorite parts of working at Uncountable is that our end users are really, really smart people. They're typically chemists, biologists, material scientists who have studied for years in whatever domain they're developing in. And they're in a lab somewhere trying to figure out how they can innovate on their company's product lines. And oftentimes that means taking an existing product and swapping out a new material or ingredient, or it means trying a whole new product line or platform. And oftentimes this involves days and nights in a lab, running experiments, trying a bunch of different things, and trying to figure out what is most profitable, what's going to advance the product the farthest, and what is the best performance or is the safest for an end consumer. And that's a lot of work goes into every product that gets released. And we at Uncountable are trying to help them figure out what to try next, which experiments are going to have the most value, and how to kind of best use their own time and the resources of their lab.
And what were they using beforehand? Were they using one system that's a legacy product? Were they using multiple systems to try to not only collect data, but also analyze it and create predictions off of it? What were they using before?
Yeah, like so many professions, the R&D world is really much on Excel and PowerPoint. You would have your own spreadsheet where you put all the data in that you're collecting at the lab bench, and then you would present it to your colleagues via PowerPoint presentation. And that's true whether or not you're in academia or a really large organization. But the problem is that at the industrial scale, where you might have a team of 200 plus scientists developing a number of different product lines, everyone's working on very similar products, even if they're approaching it from different angles. And moreover, there needs to be more sharing of knowledge in a company setting. And so we want to really make sure that people are unlocking the data so that it no longer lives in a spreadsheet and is in a centralized system that everyone can access. We work with companies that have labs in North America, Europe, and Asia, all working on very similar problems. And if they can't access what the other is working on, they could end up running redundant experiments or trying things that another lab has already determined won't be successful. And so making sure that there's a consistent system for people to access is really crucial in these industries, whether it's a chemicals company or a pharma company or a materials company.
And were those the previous experiments, just thinking about the amount of headache it would be to do something that's already been done and well tested? Is there a centralized database for that? Or are people scrounging publications, Google Scholar, or when in particular are they going to find the information prior to see if something has been tested?
Yeah, so the normal process here is you go to school, you get a really advanced degree in this type of science, and then you go to industry and find that you need even more of an education, that you need a lot of experience with a particular product area, a particular chemical area to really be effective. We've even had scientists describe this whole process to us as learning a system of black magic, that like the R&D process feels magical because a scientist with 30 years of experience can go in and know exactly what to do in a situation. But the problem is that if it takes 30 years to train a scientist to be effective, you're probably not moving fast enough. You want someone to be able to join your lab and right away be able to push out that next product line. And the only way that can happen is by trying to take that 30 years of insight that's in someone's head and actually institutionalize it and have it somewhere in a database where that you can learn from it quickly. And so for us, we really want to actually remove the magic. We want it to be a much more disciplined scientific process, after all it is science, than to be some sort of magical experience that requires 30 years of expertise before someone could be effective.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about without a system like this, what are scientists typically missing conclusions or correlations between data points? Obviously, they're doing the best they can, but I think once we find some result, I'm sure we fixate and maybe go on a trail of thought, but there might be something in the data that would maybe take us on a different direction. How much do you think, I don't know if you have a percentage, are missing in terms of the relationship between data? And also, what's the typical delay before a company like Uncountable comes in with a really sophisticated product to be able to actually give you the insights in a more rapid rate? What's the average delay and what percentage of information are we missing in the legacy products?
Yeah, I think the thing to emphasize here is that we don't make these scientists more sophisticated. They're already really smart, really well educated. But what we do is put more information at their fingertips. Mm-hmm. And so you hit it on the nail, which is like when you have information like regulatory data about what ingredients are acceptable, what raw materials are acceptable in different countries, you can run these experiments more quickly because you're more confident that you're testing something that's actually applicable to whatever product you're trying to release. And that's a really hard thing to get right. And we want to really help scientists be able to do that.
Yeah. And obviously there's always a skeptic in me, but thinking about just like all the information around, say, studies that don't actually have proven results and they're a little bit extrapolated from what's actually there. Is this in a way having the ability to not only have more sound conclusions or potential confounding outcomes, and is it a way to kind of minimize the risk of, say, having data that's, say, misinformation or things along that nature because of the way the network works and kind of validates the information or the study that you just kind of completed?
Yeah, no, I think it's really important that you're able to learn from your colleagues' sort of mistakes and failures as much as your own. So it's not only about getting more conclusions from your own data, but seeing a broader array of information that you can learn from. And so really that helps the analysis, right? So if I have twice as much data to learn from, it's not necessarily about creating a more advanced conclusion, but maybe I'm coming to a better conclusion because I have more information to work with. And that's a big part of it for us. When companies use Uncountable for several months or even several years now, what we see is their ability to act quickly on information and have the same opinion shared across the lab is much greater. And the visibility that an executive at that company has into what's happening in the R&D environment is also a lot better. So we actually can work and collaborate with a marketing team who wants to understand what's possible in the R&D environment, what would be possible for our next product release. And so you can start to connect together different parts of the organization.
It's so fascinating thinking about what technology allows you to do that. And before I go into what you kind of implemented in Uncountable, to be able to kind of not only define data, label it, but also read it and make conclusions off of it, describe the user journey a little bit for our audience. So if you're a company or organization, you want to start research and development into a particular sector, whether it's a campaign or whether it's a product, whether it's a chemical. What is my typical user experience with Uncountable, and how can I get the most out of the product if I'm thinking about using it for my next R&D project?
Yeah. So if I'm an R&D team considering using Uncountable, our first question to that team would be, where is your experiment stored today? So someone's at a lab bench mixing together a bunch of chemicals or raw materials. What happens to a record of that data? Oftentimes it goes into a physical lab notebook or a spreadsheet or something that's inaccessible to the rest of the team. And so we go and say, well, how would you like that to be stored such that other people can interpret your information? And we kind of survey a bunch of team members and try to standardize the way that information is stored so that everyone can understand each other's results. Then we go and configure the Uncountable system to reflect that standardization and have people start to record that data in our system. Now, in addition to that, we try to facilitate communication in the lab. So if I'm going and requesting that one of my technicians go and runs an experiment, that request happens in Uncountable, so you can effectively prioritize the different requests that are being made, optimize the use of lab resources, and actually track the results that are coming in. So I'd go into Uncountable, make a request based on my experiment, and then go and actually receive those results a couple of days later. So everyone in the lab environment has their own account and is logging in to see what's happening in the lab and be able to analyze that data.
It's amazing to think about the amount of collaboration that goes into using the platform and when you're distributing the results, kind of who's involved in the process. And what's like the typical use case that Uncountable sees? Obviously, it seems like a lot of organizations use it, but who optimizes the best at this point? And I guess also, who's underutilizing the platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we work with a wide variety of customers, over 75 customers actively using our product. And that's across a pretty good amount of different industries, everything from paint companies, chemicals, some life science organizations, and even food companies that are making all sorts of different consumer products. So it's really important to us that we continue to learn and get different perspectives from a wide variety of R&D organizations. R&D as a whole is a very kind of secretive discipline. Knowing what goes into a product is sort of the keys to the innovation of a company. If you understand the Coke formula, you're probably one of the very few actually trusted with that in their organization. And as a software company, we're actually given a lot of very sensitive data. And so our priority as a company is keeping that very safe and secure. At the same time, we're also given insight into how these R&D organizations work. What are the problems they're thinking about? What are the inefficiencies in how they do things? And we're able to really compile a set of tools that are helpful for all the companies we work with. So rather than approaching R&D as sort of a secretive discipline, we want to approach it as a set of scientific principles or procedures that are widely applicable no matter what type of product you're building. Yeah. And go beyond just, this is what I'm doing in this experiment, to this is how experiments should be run generally. And this is how to think about data organization. And a lot of the stuff just isn't shared because of the secrecy involved in the R&D process.
Yeah. And then a lot of that secrecy, just trying to not have proprietary information shared or industry secrets. How important is not sharing those pieces of information versus sharing kind of the procedures that allow you to at least uncover similar types of data, to at least compare and contrast your findings? That, I mean, obviously, I think the founder and me, like, tell everybody everything so we know everything, build cool stuff all at once. That's necessarily the perfect world, you know?
Well, one of the most common questions we get is, do you share data among your customers? And the clear answer is no. We never combine data sets. Every customer lives in a silo. And that's because we want to really treat every single piece of data we get from customer as securely and safely as possible. So there's never commingling of data. Regardless, though, what we do learn are things about how the R&D process actually happens in each of these lab environments, how do scientists and technicians communicate? What types of things go in the bodies of their emails when they request experiments? How do we kind of best handle those types of processes? And those are really shared across our organizations and aren't the secret part of R&D. But certainly keeping this information safe and secure is one of the main functions that we have as a company. We tell our engineers that we need to make sure that the way we store data on Uncountable is 10 to 100 times more secure than the way our customers even stored it, because it really is kind of a pillar of our organization and our software.
Yeah, I could see that the importance of that is kind of you live and die by the ability to collect this, keep it private, and redistribute it very efficiently, very effectively. But I'm also curious in terms of, I don't talk to a lot of founders who go through user experience with the lab group. And I'm curious, did you build towards the user experience on the lab for lab technicians to use and kind of go up market, or did you go to larger organizations to kind of communicate the value of having a platform and go kind of a top-down approach? What was most effective for you, and has it changed at all?
Yeah. One of the ways that we compete is by really delivering an enterprise-class solution. There are lots of pre-existing products on the market to handle electronic lab notebooks, lab information management systems that really serve smaller groups of scientists. And we want to be that enterprise solution. But as a consequence, the person paying the check or signing the check and the person using the software are very, very different. One cares a lot about the executive visibility, the ability to make sure that as a whole, the R&D organization is running efficiently. And the person using it, who's typically a scientist or a technician, cares about, how do I make sure I get this done faster today? And I want this to be as easy to use as possible, oftentimes as easy as Excel is. And those are very different needs. And I think every enterprise software organization has that same kind of set of problems. For us, the way we dealt with it is by making sure that we're adding value to scientists and their everyday work. We're really trying to understand what takes them time today when they're sort of recording data or compiling data that we can make really, really fast, because we know we're never going to be as flexible as an Excel spreadsheet. So we have to kind of win them over in different ways. And the way we win the executives over is by really making sure that we can institutionalize and standardize their data and give them the leverage they need to be able to have broader insights about the R&D process. And every company today wants to be able to use data analytics, AI, machine learning to drive insights, but you simply can't do that unless you have the data somewhere in a centralized fashion.
Yeah. And thinking about obviously jumping to the AI component, what is the advancement in that technology, at least recently, kind of allowed your company to do, or is it where you at it capabilities previously and now that's popularized? Now you're throwing on everything for everybody to SEO back search you. What kind of been the relationship with the technology, and has it advanced recently to be able to offer more capabilities? What's your response there?
Yeah. So I think what the recent advances of AI have shown is that the applications of AI are a lot broader than people previously realized. But the kind of the core technology has always worked by the more information you can give it, the better it does. And in the case of the R&D environment, that information comes in the form of experiments. So what we do for companies is provide them AI superpowers by having all that information in one place. No matter what types of models you want to use or type of AI you want to use, or if you want to leverage platforms from Microsoft or Amazon, you really need your data together. We talk with data scientists all the time at these companies that are sort of frustrated by the fact that there isn't data that they can use for their models. Yeah. They'll get one really clean data set from a project, analyze it, and then sort of be done because they just don't have a second one. And we don't want that to be the case. We want every experiment that happens in the lab to keep feeding into a larger and larger data set.
Yeah.
Some of the recent advancements really show the degree to which you can use natural language to sort of instruct a system or to engage with data. And what we're hoping is that as those advances continue to happen, and to be on the kind of the cutting edge of being able to take natural language and instruct a computer to analyze a data set for me or filter my data in some way. In Uncountable, we've already developed the technology to be able to build a machine learning model in just a few clicks based on data. We've always thought that the way you deliver machine learning is by not assuming that you're working with a trained data scientist, by assuming you're working with someone who's passionate about their data, but maybe hasn't had that training. And that's always been important to us. We've always tried to build tools that a non-statistician can use, a non-data scientist.
Yeah. And to what point, I guess, So what involvement does a scientist have? Are they inputting everything manually and the platform's kind of indexing it and allowing you to kind of build up insights, kind of collecting the data? Or have you built kind of some sophisticated where almost like plugins where other instruments can plug into and start collecting data? Where are you in that process? And do you kind of plan on involving, I guess, more automated collection of data than you do now?
Yeah, I think there's an overall goal here of letting scientists do what they do best, which is analyze data and plan experiments. The scientific method is very much about create a hypothesis and then go test it. It's not about go and spend an hour with an Excel spreadsheet. And our goal is really to get to that as much as possible, which means trying to take some of the burden away from scientists in terms of the data collection, some of that automatic kind of pipelining that you're talking about. So we work with the IT teams at our customers to try to set up automatic transfers from equipment. We have a series of high throughput experimentation tools to be able to analyze larger sets of data that's more frequently being collected in a modern lab environment, and certainly work with labs that are on the forefront of automation. So there's a lot of really cool collaborations that we're doing there. And we certainly see a future where scientists can spend more time thinking and less time sort of manipulating spreadsheets.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the traction. How many clients do you have kind of currently using the platform, and what's particularly exciting about the outcomes that they've seen in terms of maybe speed and completion or understanding of the experiments that they're running? But we'd love to hear the amount of clients and some positive outcomes that they're seeing.
Yeah, so we have over 75 customers using our product, and we, on a regular basis, are seeing that number increase pretty rapidly. And that comes from the fact that our product keeps getting easier and easier to use, and we keep seeing more and more use cases for it. We sell to such a wide variety of industries at this point that we're constantly seeing new opportunities. The success stories for us look like the standardization of data in these types of environments, where we have executives telling us that their R&D teams are better able to tackle new product development problems than they have ever been before. We work with paint companies that are putting all their data in our system, as well as a food company that might actually work with us to make sure that all their quality control and management data is in our system. And so it's a really wide variety of use cases at this point, and we're constantly looking for more.
Yeah. And thinking about both external and internal, being that obviously R&D doesn't seem to have stopped, but do you kind of foresee any potential like risks in the future or even now in terms of what would kind of impact you moving forward and continue to scale and grow your company? What risks kind of do you see out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's about really staying dynamic and making sure that we're able to address a wide variety of problems across a wide variety of industries. Scientific developments never change. The ability to collect different types of data is always evolving. And so we want to make sure that our platform is kind of flexible and customizable enough to adapt to changing circumstances. Over time, we've certainly sold to a large variety of different industries. Industries like the battery industry continue to evolve really, really rapidly. We're seeing a lot of traction in modern food industries for kind of artificial meats and milks and that type of thing. So really being able to address whenever new products come out is really important to us.
And if everything goes well, what's the long-term vision?
We want to have as much of an impact as possible in the industrial kind of scientific process. So when you are working as a scientist in industry, are you recording data in a better way? And whether that's in Uncountable or through a system that we influence, it's just really important to us that that data is being collected in a way that people can actually use it and really has a longer useful life. If you run an experiment today and then you sort of forget about it a month from now, and it gets locked away in an Excel spreadsheet on SharePoint, there's not much useful value to that work that you did. We want to make sure that a scientist 2 years from now can actually reference that experiment and use it as part of their analysis.
Yeah. How often are experiments not referenced? I could see like, at least in my index of files and information, things that just sit dormant, but are useful today. Is that happening often with these R&D teams just because of obviously it's not their capability, but the technology that they have access to? Yeah. How much is being missed in those experiments?
Yeah, I would say that there's even kind of a worse problem, which is that sometimes an individual scientist doesn't remember the circumstances for a particular experiment a year or two after they ran it. So oftentimes they won't actually trust that data and will actually go and replicate the experiment just to make sure that that result was right. And that's because of this lack of standardization. You might not record all of the necessary parameters. You might have been making assumptions about what your standard protocol looks like at any given time and not remember that your SOP changed a year later. And so it's really important to have some structure back in your data just so that you could trust it, let alone be able to reference and find it.
Yeah. I like this next section I call my founder FAQ. So I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire questions and we'll see where we go. So first question I always like to open it up with is, what's particularly hard about your job?
Yeah, so I run engineering and product for Uncountable. On the engineering side, the hardest thing that I do is hire great engineers. I'm really proud of the team that we built so far, but we're always looking to add to it and really add people that are passionate about building a really kind of strong product in addition to solving hard engineering challenges. And I find that recruiting and retaining great people is my everyday challenge. I'm really passionate about trying to find the best and make sure that we can continue to grow the engineers that we have. We pour a lot of time and thought into how we can make engineering Uncountable a good experience. And more importantly, really challenge the engineers that we have. We want everyone walking away from working at Uncountable saying, Uncountable was one of the hardest places I worked, but I grew and learned the most from working there. On the product side, the hardest thing I have to do is balance the needs and demands of our 75 plus customers. Is really making sure that as an enterprise product, we can create a really customizable product while still creating a great user experience and continuously simplifying the product. And I engage our engineers on a daily basis and sort of challenge them to figure out how we can add 10 new features and also simplify the user interface. I have to continuously do that week over week.
Yeah. Thinking about the interview process and hiring talent, so many founders, I mean, that's the biggest, well, one of the three biggest headaches, right? Building product, fundraising, and hiring people and retaining them. Like those are the buckets that you lose a lot of sleep or a lot of gray hairs about. What are the questions that you ask to identify the right talent for your team? And what's the structure that you've held, being that it's so important to kind of standardize how people are through your interview process and evaluated and added to your team? Which I don't know if it's secret sauce or something like that, but what's been valuable and successful for you to bring on great people?
Yeah, I mean, I do find the process to be particularly rewarding. So, well, more than a headache, I do think that it's actually a very interesting and rewarding but challenging process to really find those people for the team. And to me, we try to answer two questions about each of our candidates. The first is, can you do the work, right? Do you have the technical competence, the intelligence, the ability to come in and do a great job? And the second is, are you a fit for the organization? And the fit part is really where we try to differentiate. We think of fit not only as what can you bring that's sort of special and different that can help our team, but also what can we bring to you? Is there a story we can tell about why Uncountable is the next role in your career path? What are you going to learn here that you're not going to learn elsewhere? What type of flexibility can we give you that not every company can? And we have some great candidates that come through the door that are fantastic engineers, but we really can't tell a story for why we're the right role for them. And we can pass on a candidate for that reason alone. Because ultimately, if we can't convince ourselves that this is the right role for you, it's going to be hard for you to, a year into the role, to say, yes, I'm still happy working at Uncountable. And so for us, it's really about challenging the candidate and saying, what do you want to get out of the next couple of years? What do you want to get better at? Is there a different type of role you see in your future? Kind of what type of engineer do you want to be in 5 years? And we're trying to ask those questions kind of early and often in the interview process to figure out if it's a fit.
Yeah. Thinking about just like external factors that impact companies, what have you seen maybe even the last 2, 3 years, 4 or 5 in regards to external, whether it's legislation or interest in companies looking to invest in researching a certain particular aspect? One thing that comes to mind is like the Inflation Reduction Act and moving people towards buying electronic vehicles and things that are more sustainable and things like that. I'm assuming impact the research that companies do, whether including that, but what external factors kind of motivate companies to start researching in new areas that aren't particularly something that they've done before?
Yeah, so there are definitely a number of them. The biggest one is kind of macro technology trends. We're seeing a big push towards greener technologies. For example, the battery industry is seeing a resurgence, but another is sort of like supply chain shocks. And this can happen in a number of ways. I mean, especially over COVID, everyone is starting to inspect their supply chains and look for areas where they were dependent on certain countries or certain areas. And we help companies try to find substitutable raw materials, and companies really use Uncountable as a source to try to analyze their dependencies on different materials. And you also see regulations coming up. So when the EU passes a new initiative to make products greener or healthier, it's really important that companies can respond to that quickly and put out the changes that are necessary to get them into compliance. So we help a number of companies make their products more sustainable to be in line with those types of regulations.
It's so fascinating thinking about how much that pushes companies in a different direction. And one thing that also comes to mind is like, what's something that hasn't been tested on your platform that you're kind of hoping for, or waiting for, or curious about to see the capabilities and what Uncountable can really bring to the table in terms of the results and reliability? Anything come to mind?
Well, I think the imagination of every lab director is a fully automated one where you put in, this is the experiment I want to run. And then the sample goes in and it comes out with the results. And that means that it's moving around in an autonomous way, that the machines are working autonomously, and the data is pushing back to the cloud all on its own. We have companies that are at the forefront of those types of innovations, that are building autonomous labs themselves or building parts of them. And the thing that everyone wants to see is sort of the end-to-end process there. If you put in a description of what you want from a product, and then the system goes and tries to basically optimize it for you. And we have helped with many different parts of that process, including the recommendation of what experiment to try next. But really getting to that end-to-end vision, I think is what everyone is going to be working towards over the next decade.
Yeah. Obviously, you've been entrenched in this for, I think, 7 years, is what you said, with research and building the company. But I'm going to hit you with this question anyways. If you weren't working on Uncountable, what would you be doing otherwise?
Yeah, well, there's obviously a lot of really exciting technology areas. What I'm passionate about, and my two co-founders are passionate about, is really building a great organization and continue to scale a company. So for us, it's really about the challenges that come from trying to scale this product, trying to continue to grow an organization. We currently have 40 employees working for us and are constantly looking to grow the team. So no matter kind of what I'm working on, I think those are the challenges that motivate me, that I'd be passionate about. What I bring to the table is a lot of experience with data analysis, machine learning, statistics. So something in the AI field, which certainly is not dying off anytime soon, would be where I'm at.
Yeah. I like to ask this question too. Is what's something that you're good at now as a founder that you wish you were better at earlier on?
I think it's really understanding how engineers can grow in their careers and the right way to motivate different types of people. One of the things that I see is that people oftentimes don't put enough energy into setting goals for themselves. And we really work with each of our engineers to identify what they want to learn every year, what they want to get better at. And oftentimes just asking the right questions is enough there, but really trying to get better at understanding when people could use a push, when to ask them how they're feeling about the type of growth they're experiencing, is something that I continue to get better at.
Yeah, love that. I always like to ask this question because I love how founders extract knowledge out of anything that they ingest, whether it's early in your career or now. What books or people have influenced you the most?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think certainly a lot of what I learned in a university has influenced what I'm doing here. I used to work at StartX, which is a Stanford startup accelerator, where I got to work with a lot of companies at the early stages. And there's nothing quite like being able to see 20 different companies try to solve a very similar set of challenges as they get off the ground. And the reality is that early stage of going from 0 to 1 is really, really hard and always feels unique. But there's a lot of pattern matching you can do to try to figure out kind of the types of common problems. And the thing that I didn't realize and am now realizing is that going from 0 to 1 doesn't stop once you build a 40-person company like we have today. We're constantly looking at launching new types of product lines, trying to figure out how we can extend our product. And every day there's sort of a new 0 to 1 challenge in sometimes a small and sometimes a big way. And so really those lessons I learned from working with a lot of different startups helped me a lot there. And I'm sure the type of thing that your podcast listeners are trying to do themselves.
Yeah.
And so constantly trying to learn from other companies' examples.
Yeah, I love that. And I know we're coming to the end of the show, so I like to make sure we didn't leave anything on the table. Jason, is there any question I didn't ask you that I should have, or anything that we did talk about that you wanted to chat about one last moment here? Did we leave anything on the table?
I don't think so. Thank you for the really interesting set of questions and for engaging with me today here. And I'm looking forward to the listener comments as well.
Amazing, Jason. Last little bit is where can we find you as a founder? Give us all your plugs as an audience, your LinkedIn's, your Twitter's, anything and anywhere we can support not only you, but also the product and really get involved and be a fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm happy to connect with people over LinkedIn. My name is Jason Hirshman. My email address is jason@uncountable.com. I respond to all sorts of questions and ask for help there. And mainly we're looking for great engineers, great product people that want to come and join a company that's been growing consistently for the last 7 years and tackling a lot of really hard problems. So feel free to reach out if sounds interesting. You can also find more information on our website, uncountable.com. We have a whole page about how we approach interviewing, hiring, and how we really think about growing the team. So I encourage you to check that out.
Amazing, Jason. It's been such a pleasure not only learning about your experience and what got you here, but also what the capabilities of Uncountable are, not only what it's doing now for companies and labs and organizations, but also what the future capabilities are and how it continues to improve. So all in all, we appreciate you being on the show today. And thank you so much for being on Behind Company Lines.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me.
Good.